This is Hidden Killers Week in Review.
A look back at the most prolific stories of the week.
Behind every locked door is a story waiting to be uncovered. This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski, featuring psychotherapist and author Shavaun Scott.
The case against Susan Smith, it's one that's now 30 years old. That is hard to believe. Susan Smith, a South Carolina woman who claimed that her two young sons had been kidnapped during a carjacking, and the nation at that time watching, searching, pleading. This is pre-social media. This is 1994, to find these children alive. Then, about 9 days later, Smith confessed that she drowned her kids in the car, in the lake with them in it. Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, or with the possibility of parole after 30 years. That's where we are today. At the time, everyone's shocked by this, that, oh my God, 30 years, she could get out. Maybe she'll be dead by then. Well, she's not. She's not. She's still over there and ready to go. Joining me to discuss, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. Before we get into whether it's right or wrong that she could possibly get parole, let's talk about what actually happened here in this case. What do we understand drove Susan Smith to take this horrible step of drowning her kids in the vehicle?
Yeah, what an awful way for those little kids to die. I mean, I can't imagine their last moments.
Yeah.
Just horrible. What would drive a person to do that? Mothers who kill their children, there are several hundred cases a year in the U.S. Most of the time, they're psychotic and they think they're doing the right thing. I think back to the Andrea Yates case in 2001 in Texas, drowned her 5 kids in the bathtub, which was horrendous, again, made international news. She was terribly psychotic, and she was having religious delusions and thought she was sending them to heaven and saving their souls and that they would not have a chance without doing that. And she was, initially convicted of murder and appealed, and then was found not guilty or guilty, but insane. And so she is lifelong now in a mental hospital, forensic mental hospital. So she's locked up. That case came to my mind, but clearly Susan Smith was not psychotic. The other case that came to mind was Diane Downs in Oregon in 1983. Also a woman similar to Susan Smith. Diane Downs had been rejected by a man because she had children. And so she made up this story, very similar, about a carjacking. But in this case, she said that the children were shot. And so all 3 of the children were shot. Only one of them died. With Diane Downs, who had extensive psych testing, it was found that she had a severe personality disorder. And I think that's what we're looking at with Susan Smith. So the cases of mothers killing their children, first, the most common, they're psychotic. So they're having delusions and hallucinations. The next most common is they're going through a divorce and it's a revenge situation. And often they plan to suicide. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of to the father, look what you made me do. And we see men do that often too. They'll kill the kids and kill themselves. But I think what we're looking at with Susan Smith is, again, there was a situation with a man she was having an affair with. She was still legally married, but separated from her husband, and was desperate to have this man in her life. And he wrote her a letter basically breaking up with her. And one of the main reasons was because he didn't want a ready-made family and didn't want to be with a woman with kids. Mm-hmm. And so we always talk about these cluster B personality disorders. And for women in that situation, it's usually borderline personality disorder. And I think with Susan, because of the dramatic show she put on for 9 days with this elaborate story about a carjacker and, her tears, I think you've got a side dose of histrionic personality disorder. She's an actress. She's a fairly good actress. And this, of course, would be something that she had since childhood. The borderline qualities mean a person is intensely needy in romantic relationships. They have a very weak ego. They don't have a very strong sense of self. They're volatile emotionally, impulsive, can be very angry, and have very, very poor judgment, and will go to any lengths to keep a partner in life. We see it more with women. Sometimes dramatic suicide attempts in which they don't really intend to die. It's attention seeking and manipulative.
I can attest to that from life.
It's fairly common, but there are extremes. And
Oh,
so
my
I think
God.
with Susan Smith, you see an extreme case
Oh, it
of
happens.
this really bad mix of cluster B personality.
Yeah,
and they can be very good actresses. And so people may say, oh, but she was always a wonderful mother.
Yeah.
But it was about that deep. And when it came to keeping this man, she thought that this bizarre story, which again, a horrible story, saying it was a black man who carjacked her. And of course, thinking that that would make it more believable. And that's, again, an insidious thing to do.
It is. And the fact that she did sit there for 9 days and was able to do this ruse. I mean, that just shows that extra level of what the disorder. I was going to say depravity because it kind of is, but but ultimately, if we're going to talk, what's driving this engine, it's that disorder. Now we're talking 30 years later. They say, I guess the prison psychologists and such, that she's rehabilitated. She's not going to be a danger out there in the free world. Her ex, who was the father of the children, has been at every hearing. She's already had 2 attempts at being paroled and failed at both of those, one in 2015, one in 2020. This is the latest coming up here in November. And he's always advocated, no, do not let her out. Is there any reason we should let her out into society? Is there any purpose to this, knowing what we know about personality disorders and things this severe? You don't really get rehabilitated.
Right. And she has proven herself to be a very adept actress and very good at manipulation. I understand that she's had multiple sexual relationships with guards. Again, you have to wonder what's going on with this lady. And, of course, there are times when guards exploit women, but there are also women who seek out that kind of attention. And that would go with her, what I guess would be her diagnosis, always needing male attention. And so is she really rehabilitated? Is that possible? Would she be a danger at this age? 30 years older, I think she's in her 50s now. Very likely, these people do tend to kind of mellow with age. I sure wouldn't let her around kids. And I personally, when I go back to the way these children died and the way she lied about it, she clearly knew what she was doing. This was not a person who had a mental illness in the sense of they didn't know what they were doing.
Sure.
I can see just keeping her in for life.
Yeah, I don't see any positive to this. I'm not necessarily thinking, she's going to go adopt children. I don't know she could.
Right.
Or she's going to be necessarily seeking out to kill children. But she wants that attention. I can only imagine the lives that she still has the potential to ruin just in a relationship, in a romantic type sense, and the damage that she could attempt to cause there. Again, because this stuff doesn't go away. If this is how you think, this is how you operate, that's who you are.
Yeah. And such an extreme manifestation of this kind of disorder. It's just, is it forgivable? Clearly her ex-husband does not feel that way.
Yeah. I don't think it necessarily ever should be forgivable for living a life like that. So we'll see where that lands. The hearing is in mid-November, and we'll let you know how that turns.
All right, true crime addicts, let's cut the crap. You're knee-deep in the gory details of your favorite podcast when suddenly a commercial hits like a bad meal. Seriously? You deserve better. Upgrade to True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts, where you can binge without those annoying ads. Plus, get extended interviews that go deeper into the darkness and early access to episodes so you can be the first to know. It's like trading up from fast food to fine dining, but with more blood. So, go ahead. Search for True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts. subscribe, and feast on the good stuff.